Good evening. Welcome. I hope that you and your loved ones are doing well during this crazy and unprecedented time. Over the last several weeks, I've had the opportunity to reflect upon the many lessons we have learned during the COVID-19 pandemic. In an instance, we had to change everything: the way we worked, socialized, shopped, and exercised. We learned new ways to teach, meet, collaborate with colleagues while adjusting to a challenging new normal that required social isolation. The flexibility and adaptability that you demonstrated was nothing short of remarkable. Unfortunately, we also recognize more clearly the many inequities that exist for our students of color. As we look forward to next year, we must collectively examine the structures and systems that contribute to these inequities and begin to make changes. We must and we will do a better job for all of our students, but we need your help. Tonight, I'll be sharing two models of schedules, one a remote learning model and one a hybrid model. As per the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education guidance, the high school has created three models of operation. I'll be sharing information about our hybrid and remote models tonight. Waltham High School, like the rest of the district, will begin the year in remote learning with the exception of two groups. First group is our English learners at level 1 and level 2. They will be in a hybrid model where 1 week will be in person followed by 1 week of remote. Students will be cohorted by last name. Another group that will be in full-time for a half-day schedule every day will be our students with disabilities who are in sub-separate programs for greater than 75% of their normal day. For all other students, they will be in a remote learning setting. In an effort to do better, myself and my colleagues will relentlessly love, challenge, support all members of our school community by listening intently and being empathetic. Working collaboratively with students, staff, and central office personnel, we established these priorities that guided our work in developing both our remote and hybrid models. The first priority, of course, is students and staff safety. Second priority is around universal design. We're asking our teachers to create meaningful, relevant, and engaging content that is aligned to our instructional priority. Collaboration was a third priority that we put forth. We want our teachers to work in collaborative teams to relieve the stress on individual educators and ensure all students are supported. With regard to communication, we're going to make strong efforts to streamline communication to students and families. That is one of the lessons we learned from our attempt at remote learning during the spring. With regard to equitable access, we want all students to have equitable access to rigorous, relevant content. Of course, they want them to have Wi-Fi, devices that are operating, and just right supports. By limiting tracking of students, we're making an effort to improve access as well as creating efficiencies in our schedule. With regard to a social, emotional wellness, I think that goes in with safety, the health benefits of in-person learning for students and staff. We're enhanced focus on educating the whole child by attending to core content knowledge, skill development, and habits of mind. And then finally, in developing our model, we wanted to be able to smoothly transition from one model to another. And I think that you'll notice that when I show you our remote and hybrid schedules this evening. Our singular goal in creating a schedule was to create a comprehensive remote and hybrid learning model that ensures students and staff safety and equitable access to high quality learning experiences for all of our students. After establishing our priorities and goals, we went about a comprehensive process in arriving at a remote hybrid model. You can see some of the steps that we took on this slide. I won't highlight all of them, but a few major ones is that we worked on the collaborative establishment of those priorities and goals. And then we decided on key decision-making points. We decided, we had a long conversation about whether we should cohort students or not. We decided, at least with remote, we would not be cohorting specifically, but when we went to hybrid models, we would. That takes us to our remote learning model. And I'm going to try to describe a little bit, a few of the major components of this schedule, as it varies quite differently from the schedule that we had last year for those folks that were with us last year. So in this remote model, in this remote model, most core classes would meet 2 times a week for 75 minutes and 2 times a week for 20 minutes. Most elective classes would meet 1 time a week for 75 minutes and an additional 20 minutes in the afternoon. All students would have a 15-minute homeroom daily. That'd be an advisory where they'd be matched with an educator from Waltham High School. And they would work on things like maintaining a bi-weekly task calendar, and they do several check-ins to ensure that students were in a good space, both from a safety perspective, an academics perspective, as well as a social emotional perspective. In our remote model and hybrid model, we've made the decision to combine C1 and C2. We are providing all students with daily academic support. All students have a daily directed study from 12 o'clock to 12:40 each day. And there's daily opportunities for social emotional support. And we're working with our guidance staff and school adjustment counselors to create a series of webinars, videos, and one-on-one meetings targeted at our seniors and juniors initially with regard to college and career planning. And for educators, as you can see from this model, educators would have the opportunity for common planning time for 40 minutes every day. We feel that's really critical to the work that educators have to do as we move to a remote learning model. With regard to the differences of the remote versus traditional model, I'm just going to stop right here for 1 second. And just inform families that when they entered the link that I shared, they had the option of choosing a specific language through Lexikey. It's a provider that we have that is providing translation services. So I'm hoping that you're getting this presentation in the language that you did select. With regard to remote versus traditional model, this slide just shows the difference between the remote model that I just described and our traditional model. So just a moment ago, I said that most of our classes, our remote classes, our core classes will meet 2 times a week for 75 minutes. And then there'll be additional 2 times a week for 20 minutes targeted intervention for academic support for all of our students. In our traditional model, most classes meet 4 times a week for 57 minutes, and there's really no opportunity built into the schedule for that type of academic support and targeted intervention. In our remote model for electives, most elective class will meet 1 time per week for 75 minutes and an additional 1 time a week for 20 minutes. In our current schedule, electives meet 2 times a week for 57 minutes. I spoke earlier about a homeroom advisory period, 15 minutes. It's going to be about 10 students for every educator, 10-to-1 ratio that meets daily. These educators will develop really great relationships with students and really be able to help them manage this remote learning environment, both planning from an academic perspective, and like I said earlier, also giving access to any social emotional support that the student might need. In our current schedule or our traditional schedule, we had 1 30-minute homeroom per week. Talked about the merging of C1 and C2 in this model. Traditionally, we've had that separate. Students have access to daily academic support in this model, and daily academic support is provided for some students in our traditional model. Talked about daily CPT for teachers in the remote model. In our traditional model, they were only getting CPT once per week. Although most students are not going to enter in a hybrid model, most students are going to enter in a remote model. There is one population of students that will enter in a remote model, and that's our English learners who are at level 1 and level 2. They will follow this hybrid model. As you look at it, you'll probably recognize it looks very, very, very similar to what I just showed you for our remote model. So it is not a whole lot of difference. But students would be cohorted into 2 groups. So our English learners who are at level 1 and level 2, we have approximately 150 students in that category. 75 would come in week 1, and they would proceed through the 3 classes in the morning. So there's 3 classes in the morning, each 75-minute blocks. Students would be dismissed at 11:25. They would have the option at that point to get a grab-and-go lunch if they are walkers or if they have their own transportation. If they need bus transportation, we will provide lunch from 11:25 to 12 o'clock, and then students will be dismissed by bus at 12 o'clock. Those students would then go home, have time to transport, and they would all be involved, the 75 students that were in person, as well as the 75 that were at home that day. They would all be engaged in remote learning from 12:45 to 2:10. The 12:45 to 1 o'clock period, again, is for that daily homeroom advisory. That's all 150 of our Ls would be involved. English learners would be involved in that. And in the afternoon, there are 3 20-minute blocks of time where students could get additional academic support. For students that would not be involved in academic support, they would be getting academic support either from a peer, from one of their other classroom teachers, or getting some social emotional support either from a school adjustment counselor, or they could be accessing some career college planning guidance from their counselors. Everything else is pretty much the same. Teachers, again, are getting daily 40-minute common planning time from 12 o'clock to 12:40. So in both the remote and hybrid model, we've made the decision as an administration team to combine C1 and C2. And you may be asking yourself why that is happening. Well, the first thing I'd like to say is that this is for a trial period only this year. So we will be trying it for this year. That will be reviewed closely by a team consisting of our instructional leadership team, content directors, students, families, making a final decision that I will present to school committee sometime in January of 2021, whether we continue this practice of merging C1 and C2. The rationale for it is fairly simple. It builds efficiencies into our scheduling process. It helps us leverage strength of larger groups of teachers that are teaching C1 teams, C1 classes, to support one another, especially if we have a prolonged illness or absence from one of our staff members. It helps maintain appropriate class sizes for our educators and students, and it addresses a structural inequity that we do have currently at the high school. And as the leader of Waltham High School, I am committed to addressing issues of systemic racism that exist at our school, and will do work with a laser-like focus on this issue. For folks that are involved in career and technical education, I'm sure there's lots of questions. That is our students that work in programs like carpentry, culinary, automotive tech, auto body, electrical. Lots of hands-on work is done in that area. And you may be asking yourself, why are they beginning remotely? We were trying to minimize the number of students that are in the building at a specific time, at least initially, as a phased-in approach. We will begin this year. Our career tech ed students will begin the year remotely. Most of the instruction will focus on safety and theory. Assignments that are given will be projects that develop conceptual understanding and also hands-on learning opportunities. This again will be evaluated in September and October by our instructional leadership team, our content director, and our admin team. We'll also analyze closely COVID data to see if it makes sense to bring more students in to a hybrid model. And in late October, mid-October, we will bring a recommendation to the school committee. This is definitely a group that we would want to be in the building for a hybrid setting at the very least. Many of you may be thinking about electives. We are committed to providing access to all electives based on student choice. So all of the electives in our program of studies that students selected, that we had enough students select, will be offered. And again, just to remind you, those electives, those 2-period electives, will meet one time a week for 75 minutes and one time a week for 20 minutes. Credits. We have maintained all the same amount of credits for all of our courses in both the remote and hybrid model, with 2 exceptions. Our 9th grade physics class has gone from a 6.25 credit course to a 5.0 credit course. And our 9th grade integrated math class has also gone from a 6.25 credit class to a 5.0 credit class. 9th graders can still accumulate, with this change, 35 credits. That's a reduction from a typical 37.5 credits, but we feel that students will have enough to graduate even with that reduction. Our graduation requirement is 120 credits to graduate from Waltham High School. So 35 credits seems to be enough for all of our 9th graders. If we have to make any adjustments in years going forward, we will. The reason for this change was fairly simple. In our remote and hybrid schedule, we basically cut the number of periods in half, from 30 periods a week to 15. The physics and math classes in a traditional model would meet 5 times a week, and I could not cut 5 in half, so I had to make it a 4-period block class, which is equal to 5 credits. And then in doing so, I was able to make it work in both our remote and hybrid model. The work that our staff needs to do in moving forward is they're doing work on curriculum modifications. We have a couple of weeks of planning ahead of us, starting on August 31st. It will continue for 2.5 weeks. And teachers will be working on things about establishing power standards, standards that students need to know in order to be successful in the next course. We'll be looking at stuff, standards and skills that may have been missed during the spring of last year, and we'll be able to fill in some gaps as well. With regard to professional learning of staff, around an umbrella of teaching for equity, we need to help teachers with teaching in a longer block of time. Like I said earlier, we're going from 57 minutes to 75 minutes. There has to be some work around differentiated instruction. That's due to the fact that the merging of C1 and C2 classes, there'll be a little bit wider array of students. And then finally, work on social emotional learning. And I said earlier that we were going to make a concerted effort to focus on the whole child. And that's content, that's skills, that's habits of mind that all students need to be successful at with years to come. What we're asking for your help with as we start the new year is just to make sure that students have a nice workspace at home. Students that are going to be remote or hybrid need a nice spot at home where they can engage in activities like this, where they may be listening to a presentation by an educator or talking to classmates as they solve problems, work on essays or the like. So a nice space for them, quiet space for them to get work done. I think the establishment of a daily schedule will be helpful. You saw the schedule. The schedule has not really changed dramatically from what we have, at least the start time and end time. We're starting classes at 7:30. We're ending at 2:10. Because of that 7:30 start time, it is really important that students are getting the proper rest. So we want to make sure that students know that start time is 7:30 and are getting the proper rest. For those folks that are going to be in the building and right away, students with disabilities, like I said, that are in sub-separate programs for more than 75% of the time, and our English learners who are at level 1 and level 2, just want to reiterate with them at home the importance of wearing a mask and this idea of physical distancing and making sure that they are 6 feet away from folks. So that is the formal presentation that I had for you. Today's main goal was to show you the remote and hybrid learning schedule. We will now entertain some questions. I'm joined this evening, I probably should have said that earlier, I'm joined by Brenda Pena. She's the associate principal of the class of 2021, and she's going to help me manage some of the questions you have. I'll keep this slide up for a little bit. That's just my contact information. If there's something I don't answer this evening and you really want to address it with me, please contact me at that email address that's shown. So I'm looking for some questions, and just give me a second to sort of manage some of these questions. So Julia is asking about how buses are going to work. In the district plan, the district reopening plan, there was clear guidance around the area of busing. Busing will continue in the similar fashion that it has in years to come with regard to bus stops. There'll be a maximum of 22 students on a bus as opposed to a more traditional model prior to COVID-19 where we had 76 students in there. Milton's asking, so in the first week, all students are going to be in remote schedule yet. So Milton, I would say yes, all students are going to be in remote learning starting on September 16th, with the exception of two groups. One is students with disabilities who are in our sub-separate programs. We're talking at the high school, maybe about 25 students from that population. And the second group will be in a hybrid model. That will be our English language learners who are at level 1 and level 2. They'll be in two cohorts, and those cohorts will be established by last name. A through LE will be in cohort A, and LE to Z will be in cohort B. This schedule that I showed today, Davina, is just for the high school. So yes, that is just for the high school. There will be a separate, someone's asking about middle school, there will be a separate schedule for the middle school. Diane's asking about more buses. Due to the limited amount, at least initially, in the remote model, the number of buses will not change. Like I said, at the high school, we will have, on any given day, approximately 100 students in there. If and when we go to a hybrid model, transportation may need to add additional buses, but we're not seeing the need for it. The hybrid model will allow us to use the same number of buses at this time. Yeah, that's. Yeah, Miss Davidson is providing clarification. If you are in ESL 1 or ESL 2, you will get a notification of what cohort you're in. Diane, thank you so much for that. I'm just looking if there's any additional questions that need to be addressed at this time. I'm not seeing any additional questions at this point. I'll just pause for a minute to see if there's more time for that. I'm going to put up that last slide one more time. Check any additional comments. So as a reminder, if you did not have a question answered this evening, you could contact me at the email address that is shown on the screen right now. In the chat, I'll put my work number as well, so you could contact me at that number as well. So if there aren't any other questions, I just want to thank everyone for attending this evening. I want to thank Ms. Pena for helping me manage the questions that came in today. I am really excited about the upcoming school year. I do think as though it's challenging at times to think about schooling in a different way. I feel it's a really great opportunity for us to do some great work with our students. And I think the schedules that we provided you today give us some real promise to help students both from an academic standpoint and a social emotional standpoint. I am really excited about lots of components of this schedule. One that I've spoken about a lot this evening is the homeroom advisory period. I really feel like every student will have a trusted adult that they could go to with any problem that they're having, and also give the educator could give students guidance on where to get help with regard to academics or social emotional wellness. So I'm really excited about this upcoming year. I hope everyone on the call is as well. If you have any questions or comments that you'd like to share with me in a different way, phone number is 1. Call me anytime. I'll be in the office, or contact me at that email address. And at this point, I would just like to say thank you to everyone. And thank you again to Ms. Pena. Good evening.